Hi everybody, welcome to the fourth edition of the Telescope Hangout. So I'm here today with Joshua, who's joining us again. And I think this is going to be a short one, so I'll just briefly go over recent telescope news, and then we'll take a look at a few questions that we have in the chat room. So yeah, first of all, here's what has what's happened in Telescope this week. So the last release, let me share my screen here. The last release was called a Refractorscope, and that's because it didn't really introduce any new features except one, but it did include a lot of refactoring and cleaning up stuff. So the new feature is Fast Render. And Fast Render is a package by Arunoda, and what it does is really cool. So if you have a telescope app or any Meteor app, the way it usually works is like when you load the page, first it will load a bunch of HTML, and then that HTML will load some JavaScript, and that JavaScript will then query the server to get the data. So Fast Render kind of shortcuts all of that because it will include the original data needed to render the first page right in that first request, so along with the HTML. So if we look at the head tag here, you can see this script type text fast render thing, and all of that. You can see subscription categories, true settings true. So all of that is data about the subscriptions that we need to display that first page. So that makes the first load a lot faster, and it's a much better experience for the user. So that's really cool. And yeah, thanks to Arunoda for taking care of integration and all of that. What else? I did a bunch of work to keep extracting core features into their own package. For example, the digest now has its own package. And again, the digest is this view, this day-by-day view, which I will probably rename to something else because digest isn't that explicit. So I was thinking of calling it just the single day view. I've done the same thing with the invites feature. So that's not fully extracted. There's still a few bits of code remaining in the core, but at least the UI. So this thing here is in its own package. And while I was doing that, I also made the user account and profile page modular. So for example, if you go here, this whole thing used to be like a whole block, a single template with a whole bunch of HTML, markup, and JavaScript, and so on. Now each block has its own template. And what's really cool is each template also includes its own subscriptions. So whereas previously the subscription for all of that data was on the route for that page, now if you remove one of these blocks, it will also remove the subscription, which means you won't be loading any unnecessary data anymore. So that's more or less what's new in Telescope. Since then, I've been mostly fixing bugs, making sure everything works more or less properly. And yeah, I guess right now my focus is a little bit more on stability and polish than new features, at least for the next couple weeks. Hey, David is in the chat room. David, if you want to join us in the Hangout, the URL is right there. Don't be shy. What else? Oh, another cool thing I wanted to share is this really nice telescope customization I came across called Toolyo, so toolyo.com. So it's basically a directory of useful tools which you can filter by price or category. It's a really nice customization because, for example, this price thing, that's something that's not in Telescope. By default, in Telescope, there's only one type of category, so I thought that was pretty nice. You can sort, submit as usual. And also, obviously, the design is very customized as well. So that's about it for this week's news. And we have a few questions. So why don't we start with your question, Joshua? Maybe you can repeat it for people watching on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so pretty much I was looking at the entire the whole dynamic templating thing in Telescope, and I was just curious if there was like a way to store the templates in MongoDB and possibly render those dynamically with the data, like WordPress. So maybe have like multiple themes installed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, I don't know anybody who's doing that, but I think it should be possible. Because, for example, FastRender is taking data from the database and injecting it in the page. So why not do the same kind of thing with markup data or even maybe JavaScript code? I don't know. Like, I feel it might not be that easy, but it does sound possible.
Okay.
Other than that, the other thought I had for WordPress style packages, well, it turns out you can actually execute Node code like remotely. There's a package for that. So from the client, if you set up a Meteor method, you should be able, in theory, I guess, to add and remove Meteor packages.
Oh.
Which is a great way to like completely wreck
That
your
would
app
be
if you're not
interesting.
careful. But if you limited that to a list of predefined theme packages, I feel like maybe that would work. Like you could just add them and remove them on the fly from the settings. Now, of course, it would require restarting your app. It wouldn't be like instant, but
Right. Yeah, that'd be interesting to see how that would work. So cool. Thanks.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, then again, like WordPress has such a different architecture. I feel like we're always going to be little bit limited for some stuff. Like, I feel like I was also thinking about how would you make Telescope auto update, like WordPress, you click a button and it updates. It's really cool. But for Telescope, I don't know how you would deal with Git conflicts and your own customizations and so on. So for now, at least, I think we're kind of stuck with the traditional Git-based workflow and
Yeah.
doing some stuff manually. What else? So we have a question here about Polymer. I know exactly nothing about Polymer. Like, all I know is basically the name. I know what it's called. I know it's made by Google, but that's about it. So I don't really feel qualified to answer. I do know, though, that there was a presentation about Meteor and Polymer by the differential guys at the last dev shop. So if you want to watch that video, it should answer a lot of these questions.
Oh, one thing.
Yeah.
There's a package for Polymer. It's called Meteor Polymer. I don't know. I don't know much about Polymer, but that could be a place to start. So I can post the link in the chat, and
Yeah.
you can check it out.
Sounds good. We had a great question about a development process. So I assume this is about for the development process of Telescope. So Telescope is my first open source project, to be honest, and I don't really know how you're supposed to manage those things. Like, it's still a bit mysterious to me, and what I feel is you could have the best process in the world, but it won't really be useful if it just slows people down. And at the end of the day, you want people to contribute. So that's why I haven't really defined the process, because I was afraid that adding more steps or more rules would turn people off. But then again, as the project grows, yeah, I definitely think that will become needed. So yeah, I don't know. So far, people have been working on whatever they feel like working on, and then submitting pull requests. Most of the time, it works. In a few cases, I had to I didn't accept the pull request, or most likely, what I usually end up doing is re redoing the pull request myself, but in a not a better way, but like more um, a way that fits more with what I want to do. Also, because Telescope changes so fast that a lot of the time, by the time I get to actually looking at the pull requests, there's like conflicts and it doesn't really make sense anymore. So we should definitely avoid those kind of problems. And I'm really open to any suggestions. So like we could have like a development branch, but again the problem is like I'm not sure if people would actually look it up and test it out. So for now, at least, there's still just a master branch, but whenever there's a bug on the master branch, I try to be really fast in fixing it and really responsive. So yeah, I don't know. That probably doesn't answer the question, but I don't know, Joshua, if you have any feedback on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I really haven't figured out a perfect process for myself either. I'm still experimenting with different things, and it's new, so it's new to me and probably a lot of people. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
the
not
problem
completely.
also is like the more the more new tools or new solutions you try out, the more it fragments the community. So that in itself is a problem. It's probably the biggest problem. So, Trello is great, but just the fact of having Trello plus GitHub issues is already in itself kind of confusing for people sometimes. Same thing with chat. So I opened a Gitter chat room, which is really cool, but people are starting asking questions there, which would be more appropriate, on GitHub or maybe even Stack Overflow. So yeah, I feel like this whole thing hasn't quite been solved yet. I feel like the solution would probably be using Telescope Meta to centralize everything. So one of the things I want to do is have a package that makes it very easy to auto-post to a Telescope app from, let's say, a RSS feed or an API. This way, whenever anything happens, it will end up on Telescope Meta, and we can coordinate there. I think that would be a start at least. What else? So there's a question about user profiles. I'm not entirely sure. It's by Daller. Um, I think he should probably come on the Hangout next week to ask it directly, because it needs a little bit of clarification, I think. So let's keep that one for later. And finally, the rhetorical question of the week, also by Daller. How many millisashes will it take to build and deploy a telescope? His answer is it depends on how polished the meteor is and how tight is the atmosphere. So hopefully, the answer will be 0 millisashes, because I would really like Telescope to be so simple that people can do whatever they want without having to involve me. But we're not quite there yet, so for now I'm happy to help. Um, yeah, let me check Twitter if there's anything there. No, so I guess this was pretty short. Do you have anything you want to add? Maybe share what you've been working on?
No, I don't. I don't have anything this week.
Oh, we had a short talk about like deploying telescope, like maybe making it easier to do that.
Oh, yes, yes. Um, what was that thing you were talking about? Gideer or whatever?
Yeah, so Gitter used to be like a third-party service that would let you deploy any GitHub repo to Meteor's own hosting service. Well, any Meteor app's GitHub repo. And that worked really well for Telescope. The problem is I think they run into GitHub's API limits, so they ended up shutting it down. So right now there's not like a one-click deploy solution for Telescope. I just emailed DigitalOcean about maybe adding Telescope as one of their one-click deploy apps. So that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and it would be great exposure for Telescope as well.
Oh, yes.
Um, Apart from that, Docker seems really cool, but I haven't really looked into that so much. I mean, Meteor app is great, but it's not really one click. Like it does
Yeah,
require
yeah,
you
Meteor
to.
is awesome, but I think it would be nice to have something where you could set up your own server and one click install your GitHub repository. That would be nice.
Yeah, yeah, that would be really cool. And so yeah, let's keep looking. Um, I don't think it's like really hard to do technically, but I'm really not a DevOps guy or a server administration guy, so like running a mob deploy is kind of the extent of my skills in that domain. But if anybody has suggestions on how to use Docker, if there are other services that can provide one-click deploys on DigitalOcean, that would be really cool. Or if they do it themselves, then it would be obviously even better. I do wanna make a screencast about deploying with Meteor app, and I think that will help a lot because it's not complicated, but for people who have never done it, sometimes it can be confusing just knowing which steps to do stuff or where to put which variable. So yeah, I'll do that. I already did 2 screencasts, one about installing Telescope and one about the settings panel. So both really short and really simple, but I think it's still helpful for people who are just starting out. So hopefully I'll have time to do a few more on various aspects of Telescope. Yeah, I think that's about it for this week. Again, as usual, if you have any questions, you can ask them throughout the week on your Crowdcast page, and then we'll do our best to answer them. Also, don't be shy about sharing what you've been doing with Telescope. If you have a cool customization like we saw with Twilio, I'm always happy to show off what Telescope can do. Cool. So see you all next week.